most of us, the human nervous system is something we take for granted. Without our noticing, it allows us to feel, see, hear, breathe, move. Seems simple enough, but it is spectacularly complex. Made up of the brain, spinal cord, and a vast network of nerves throughout our bodies, the human nervous system is a physical masterpiece. All animals have a nervous system, but only vertebrates, or animals with a backbone, have a complex nervous system consisting of central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is comprised of the nerves and neurons found in the spine and brain, while the peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves that extend throughout your body. Let's look at the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord first. When you came to school today, how did you remember the way? Your eyes just blinked without you thinking about it. How? When you dream at night, where does that come from? Your brain is in charge of these things and a lot more. In fact, your brain is the director of your body. It controls just about everything you do, even when you're asleep. The brain is like a supercomputer that can solve problems, receive and respond messages, create stories, and play video games. Sometimes all at once if you're quite clever. One of the brain's primary jobs is to interpret the information it receives from the nervous system. The brain also controls every movement in your body, consciously or unconsciously. It is made up of billions of nerve cells called neurons. These neurons constantly communicate with each other. It is the passing of information through these neurons that activates thinking, learning, muscle movement, all five senses, and everything else that is processed in your brain. There are several parts of the brain. We will examine 5 main sections. First, assemble the following ingredients: water, flour, cream of tartar, vegetable oil, salt, and red food coloring. Mix the water, salt, flour, and cream of tartar in a large bowl or blender until the lumps disappear. Then, mix in the vegetable oil. Put the entire mixture into a saucepan and cook it over low heat until it gets thick and lumpy. Pour the mixture out and let it cool. Then knead and shape it into the form of a brain. Don't forget to add wrinkles to your brain. Squid in red food coloring for blood vessels. Once you have made your brain, keep it and try to identify the various brain regions that are discussed in the next video segment. Did you know that different parts of the brain control different functions? The cerebrum. The cerebrum is located in the upper and outer region of the brain, the largest structure of the brain. It is 85% of its weight and the thinking part of the brain. It also controls your voluntary muscles. the ones that you move when you ask them to. You cannot dance or play cricket without your cerebrum. The cerebrum is also responsible for storing and accessing your memories, both short-term memory, what you ate for dinner last night, and long-term memory, the name of your teacher 2 years ago. And the cerebrum helps you to reason and prioritize. It helps you determine that you need to do your homework right after school if your friend is coming over late. Smart, right? Locate the cerebrum on your brain models. The cerebrum has two halves, one on the either side of the head. The right half of the cerebrum controls the left side of your body and the left half controls the right side. That is because the nerves from the right side of the body cross over to the left side and vice versa when they reach the brain. Just 10% of the world population is left-handed. Let's see what the percentage is in your class. In this activity, we are checking students' handedness by seeing which hand they prefer to use in the following test. Record your observations. Firstly, ask your subject to write his or her name. Observe your subject to see if he or she writes with the right or left hand. Secondly, ask your subject to cut a circle out of a piece of a paper. In which hand does your subject hold the scissors when cutting the piece of paper? Lastly, give a ball to your subject and ask him or her to throw it to you. Which hand does your subject use to throw a ball? Based on these three actions, is your subject left or right-handed? Then, observe your subject to see if he or she eats with the right or left hand. You should only count the hand that is used to bring the food to your subject's mouth. Secondly, observe which hand your subject uses to pick up a cup of water to drink. Record your observations. Is your subject consistent in the hand he or she uses? Most people are either right-handed or left-handed. However, there are different degrees of handedness. Some people use one hand for jobs that require skill and the other hand for jobs that involve reaching. Other people use the same hand for these different jobs. Use this handedness questionnaire to measure the strength of handedness in yourself. Place a mark in a box for each question that describes you best. The cerebellum. The cerebellum is at the back of the brain, below the cerebrum. It controls balance, movement, and coordination. That means how your muscles work together. Because of your cerebellum, you can stand upright, keep your balance, and move around. Think about trying to stand on a log or a balance beam on the playground. You are using this part of the brain when you do that. Locate the cerebellum on your brain models. The brain stem. Another brain part that's small but very important is the brain stem. The brain stem sits beneath the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum. It connects the rest of the brain to the spinal cord, which runs down your neck and back. The brain stem is in charge of all the functions your body needs to stay alive, like breathing air, digesting food, and circulating blood. Locate the brain stem on your brain models. The pituitary gland. This part of the brain is the winner of big things coming in small packages. The pituitary gland is very small, only about the size of a pea. Its job is to produce and release hormones into your body. If your clothes from last year are too small, it's because your pituitary gland released special hormones that made you grow. This gland also plays a role with lots of other hormones, like ones that control the amount of sugars and water in your body, and it helps keep your metabolism going. Your metabolism is everything that goes on in your body to keep it alive and growing and supplied with energy, like breathing, digesting food, and circulating your blood. Locate the pituitary gland on your brain models. The hypothalamus. The fifth and final main part of the brain, the hypothalamus, is like your brain's inner thermostat. You know, the little box on the wall that controls the heat in your house? The hypothalamus knows what temperature your body should be, about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. If your body is too hot, the hypothalamus tells it to sweat to cool you off. If you're too cold, the hypothalamus triggers shivering, so you will warm up. The hypothalamus also senses and regulates other properties of your body, like level of blood, sugar, and water content. If you're dehydrated, your hypothalamus tells you that you're thirsty. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. Locate the hypothalamus on your brain models. The brain is a very important part of the nervous system. But if it were just floating around inside your head, it wouldn't be worth much. It's the brain's connection to the rest of your body that makes it so valuable. The spinal cord. The brain is connected to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord is the main pathway for information between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. There are long neural fiber tracts ascending and descending the spinal cord. This pathway carries the motor information from your brain to your body, signaling you to move. It also brings back sensory information, allowing you to feel hot and cold temperature, vibration, sharp and dull sensations, and to sense the positioning of your arms and legs. When you move, messages travel from the brain down the spinal cord to tell you to wiggle your fingers. Messages are also carried from your finger back up the spinal cord to the brain to allow you to feel pain when you prick it with a needle. The spinal cord also helps control blood pressure, heart rate, and the overall temperature of the body. There are bundles of neurons in the spinal cord, motor neurons and sensory neurons, and there are nerves that branch off the spinal cord, like branches of a tree. They are called spinal nerves. The nerves are divided into 5 main sections that go to different parts of the body. Starting at the base of the skull and going down, they are cervical nerves, thoracic nerves, lumbar nerves, sacral nerves, and coccygeal nerves. They control the limbs and bodily functions such as breathing, urination, and bowel movements. The spinal cord and nerves are very fragile. The backbone or spinal column protects them. The bones of your spinal column are called vertebrae. You have 33 of them. They are stacked with space in between them that makes your spine flexible. Animals with a spine are called vertebrates. Mammals like us have backbones, but so do birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes. Cerebrospinal fluid encases the spinal cord and brain. This protects the spinal cord from pinching and damage and cushions the brain against sudden impact. If you sever your spinal cord in the lumbar or lower back region, you would be paralyzed from the waist down. Sever the cord in the neck or cervical region and you will be paralyzed from the neck down. That's how important the connection is between the brain and the body. The blood-brain barrier also protects the central nervous system. The barrier is a network of blood vessels and cells that separates the blood circulating in your body from the cerebrospinal fluid, filtering blood flowing to the brain. It occurs along all capillaries and consists of tight junctions around the capillaries. It prevents foreign substances from entering the central nervous system. Time for another activity. Get a large piece of paper, large enough for a boy or a girl to lie on from head to toe. Have a fellow student lie down on this paper and trace around his or her body. Now, fill in and color this outline with parts of the nervous system. The brain and spinal cord should be easy. Do that first. Don't forget the sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin. Label the parts that you draw. Use your textbook as a guide to draw in the peripheral nervous system on your paper, connecting all the parts of the body to the spine. The peripheral nervous system is like branches on a tree, growing out of the trunk, the spinal column. And label the sections of the spine, that is cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. So now we know the neural wiring of the body. It's like we have opened up the back of a radio to see all the wires inside. We know that there are nerve connections from the spine out to the arms, legs, head, face, and internal organs. But how are messages being sent from the brain and spinal cord throughout the body? What happens when you turn on the radio? Believe it or not, like a radio, our nerves operate by electricity of a sort. Your brain is composed of billions of microscopic cells called neurons. The neuron is a structural unit, the smallest component of the nervous system. We have about 100 billion neurons in our body, 10 billion in our brain alone. To picture the size of a neuron, think about the fact that 30,000 neurons can fit on the head of a pin. Messages are sent by electrical impulses of the nerve cells in the brain. Neurons carry special signals back and forth throughout your body. Neurons are highly excitable. Billions of neurons constantly interact in incredibly complicated networks, all unseen and unnoticed by us. There are short and long neurons, each with specialized functions. Olfactory neurons enable you to smell your mother's cooking. But even at that tiny size, we know what they look like. Neurons come in many shapes and sizes. Here's a trick to remembering the parts of a neuron. Hold out your arm and spread your fingers. This is the basic structure of a neuron. Your hand represents the cell body. Your fingers represent dendrites. They bring information to the cell body. Your forearm ending at the elbow represent the axon. It takes information away from the cell body. Draw around your hand and forearm and label the parts on a piece of paper. It all starts with an electrical impulse traveling through the body of a nerve cell. Eventually, the impulse will travel down the length of a long branch called the axon, your arm in the drawing. When the impulse reaches the end of an axon, a chemical called a neurotransmitter is released and travels across the synapse. Synapse is a small gap of space where one neuron meets and communicates to another. After traveling across the synapse, the chemical reaches the receiving branches of another neuron called dendrites, your fingers in the drawing. This will start an electrical signal traveling through the next neuron and so on until the message is sent. Let's look closer at the structure of the axon and see how the impulse travels. Axons are the primary transmission lines of the nervous system. Individual axons are microscopic in diameter but may be several feet long. The axons are covered in myelin sheaths. There are gaps in the sheath known as nodes of Ranvier, occurring at evenly spaced intervals. At the nodes, action potentials are amplified and transmitted down the axon. The myelination allows an especially rapid mode of electrical impulse creation called saltation. Synapses are incredibly important to the functioning of the nervous system. They are the connection between neurons, junctions that allow one neuron to pass an electrical or chemical signal to another. When learning happens, your nerve cells develop new synapses and strengthen existing ones. If a series of connections develops to form a new ability or understanding, this is called neural pathway. All neural pathways consist of chains of neurons that make the nerve impulse conduction possible. When you are learning your way around a new place, your brain is forming new synapses. Remember when you learned how to ride a bike? It was difficult when you first tried it. But as you kept trying, your nervous system developed a pathway of nerve cell connections for the motions involved. Now, you are hardwired and will most likely never forget how. Riding a bike is an example of an activity that when you learn it, your nervous system develops a new neural pathway. Depending upon what you are learning, any number of neurons are making connections, crisscrossing throughout your brain. The following diagram illustrates the complexity of the connections in the brain. These dots represent neurons. Each neuron needs to make connections with the 10 neurons on the other side of the paper. Try it yourself. Draw 10 dots on one side of a piece of the paper and 10 dots on the other side of the paper. Connect each dot on one side with the 10 dots on the other side. It gets very complicated very quickly, and this is just 20 neurons. Each neuron may actually make thousands of connections with other neurons. If you tried this, your paper would get really messy. This should give you some sense of the amount of connections and the dense web of wiring in the brain. But just how efficient are these connections? What is the speed of the signal sent by the nerve cells? A message traveling in the nervous system can go 200 miles per hour. These signals are transmitted from neuron to neuron across synapses. To demonstrate this, let's make a human chain of neurons. Everyone stand up and form a circle. Each person in the circle is going to be a neuron. Each person should be about arm's length away from the next person. When the teacher says go, have one person start the signal transmission by slapping the hand of the neighboring person. This second person then slaps the hand of the next person. The third person then slaps the hand of the fourth person, and the signal goes around the circle. The transmission is complete when the signal goes all the way round a circle. Measure the time it takes the signal to get around the circle with a stopwatch. Also, measure the approximate distance the signal must travel, that is, the distance of the circle. If you divide the distance by the time, you will get the speed of the signal. Did you come close to 200 miles per hour? Probably not. Let's take a moment to review the parts of the neuron: the axon, dendrite, and soma. What part of your body was the axon in this role? The arm that gave the slap to the next person is the axon, and the hand that gave the slap is the nerve terminal of the axon, or axon terminal. And which part is the dendrite? The hand that received the slap was the dendrite. The space in between the hands of two people was the synapse. So, what was the soma or cell body then? The middle part of your body was the soma in this role play. So, now you understand how a neuron functions and the role the different parts of a neuron play in communicating by electrochemical signal one to the next, and how a whole chain of neurons forms a neural pathway when you learn something new by studying or practicing a sport or a musical instrument, and how these neurons have different roles in different areas of the body and brain, and that the brain connects to the spinal cord, the two components of the central nervous system, and the spinal nerves reach out like branches from a tree trunk to all parts and organs of the body, as the peripheral nervous system. And the billions of neurons in our brains direct every little action and thought. Every laugh and smile of the billions of people in the world. Like the billions of stars in our galaxy.